All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Street Epistemology live stream here on Navigate with Nate. I'm back with Richelle, who I interviewed a couple weeks ago, and I can hear myself. Pause that. Okay. um, Back here with Richelle again with a different claim this time. So, if you caught our interview week and a half ago, something like that, welcome to part two. And if you didn't, let's check that out sometime. So, Richelle, give you a chance if you'd like to talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself for those of us who might not have seen you last time, and tell us a little bit about the claim that you're bringing and maybe kind of where you came up with that.
Okay. On the YouTube video comment section, I put a book recommendation. Eric Kaufman's book, Shall the Religious Still Inherit the Earth? Wait, no. Name of the book doesn't have the word "still" in it, but it was written over a decade ago, and I recently watched a talk by him where he's still saying yes. So it's still. The demographics have continued to go in the direction that he predicted. And basically, religious people have more children. I like to say that the people that are least likely to believe in evolution are the most evolutionarily fit. And so over time, it's actually quite a big difference. Like the more religious someone is, the more children they have. And it seems to be across cultures and religions, especially the Abrahamic religions. And the more religious someone is, the more children they have, and the less religious they are, the fewer children they have. And so eventually you will get fewer and fewer religious people.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So before we really dive into some of those reasons, I guess we first need to make sure we are happy with the claim and how we've kind of got it set up here. So I've got a couple of different versions of this. That atheism will be bred out of the gene pool. That was kind of the original wording you had of your claim. And then just for brevity's sake, I reworded it as atheists will go extinct. Which of these are you happier with? Which do you think of those do you think better represents the view that you have?
Well, I don't think we'll ever get to a state of 0% atheists. That's kind of undefendable in its accuracy, but the non-religious will become a smaller and smaller segment of the gene pool.
Okay, interesting. All right, so we'll have to dive into kind of what you mean by that. So I think this maybe is more accurate. Is there slightly different wording that you would be happier with than this, or are you pretty satisfied with the wording that's on the screen right now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, so I guess first thing we want to do is make sure we're talking about the same thing. So when you say atheism, what do you mean?
Not believing in religion, not believing in God. Specifically the Abrahamic religions, because the Asian religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, are kind of different. The Abrahamic religions have the be fruitful and multiply commandment.
Okay.
So they're a bit different.
Okay. So would you consider Hindus atheists then? Or I'm a little confused about when you say they're a little different. Okay.
They don't well, they do have a problem with low birth rates in China, Japan, Korea, even India now. And their dynamic with preferring boys over girls is especially hurting them. And so the dynamic happening there is a bit different.
Okay.
but their religions are not particularly advantageous evolutionarily. It seems to be the Abrahamic religions that are.
Okay, interesting. All right, but as far as when you say atheism, right? If we're just focusing on defining that term, you mean not believing in the Abrahamic God specifically?
Yeah, we can go with that for this conversation.
Okay. I mean, I just want to make sure I'm using the term the way that you're using it. So, and then when you're saying the gene pool, what do you mean by that?
Well, the genes of everyone in the population. We contribute to the gene pool if we have children, and if we don't, then we aren't contributing and we breed ourselves out.
Okay. Okay, and so breeding ourselves out would just be like not contributing genes into the next generation. Does that sound right?
Right.
Okay, cool. All right, before we really get into your thought process behind this, do you want to give a confidence level on this claim?
On a scale of 1 to 10, let's give it a 7.
A 7? 7 out of 10. Okay. All right. Can I? Oh, I'm gonna just put that on there. Why not? This is kind of fun. All right. Playing around with stuff. All right. 7 out of 10 confidence level for this claim that atheism will be bred out of the gene pool. All right. So I think you kind of got into a book that you had read, right? That you had posted in the comments before. So is that book or some of the things in that book your main reason for believing this, or would you like to kind of go back over that and see if you can kind of identify one main reason you think this is true?
The book had good ideas that I already suspected, and just like he did he's a demographer, and so he did his math, and he broke it up between like Christians, Muslims, Jews, and looking at different countries around the world and different religions. And it's pretty consistent that the more religious people are, the more children they have. And that, like, for example, the Mormons, it looked like they were going to lose share as a percentage of the population in Utah because of non-Mormon immigrants coming in. But because they had just one more child per family than non-Mormons, they increased their share of the Utah population. And he talks about the Amish. The Amish have a lot of children, and even though they started as a very small group, they will become a larger and larger percentage of the population, especially because the mainstream population is having so few children. In Europe, it's in some places it's down to like 1 child per woman. So it's basically just demographics.
Okay, gotcha. So your main reason seems to be like just how many children people are having, right? That like fertility rate that seemingly more religious people, especially those Abrahamic faiths, right? That they're having more children than people who are less religious. Now, is this like kind of on a continuum? Okay, it's because when you say like more religious, you mean like, you know, if there's people who are at 0 religiosity and some people are like 10, then the people at 10 religiosity are going to be having more kids than even the people at 7 or 6 or 4. Okay.
Yeah. And like fundamentalism seems to be a response to the rise of secularism. And so they are particularly interested in shielding their children from mainstream culture.
Okay.
And so even though mainstream culture is becoming more secular, their children are their defection rate is pretty low, and they're having so many children. And it's like the more fundamentalist they are, the more children they have. It's almost like a like badge of honor the more children you have. And this seems to be pretty across the board for the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians, that the more children they have, the more like prestige they have in their religious communities.
Okay. So more religious people have more children. And then you also were talking about defection rates, as in like people who leave that religion or deconvert or switch religions or something like that, right? Now you did say that there's like a rise of secularism. What do you mean by that?
Well, the mainstream culture has lost their religiousness. I mean, a few decades ago, the vast majority was Christian in America, and it was kind of taken for granted. And then we had the rise of atheism and more moderate religion, like people who say I'm spiritual but not religious, or I don't like organized religion and things of that nature. People just became less interested in being part of a church. But that's kind of like an extinction event. Like the environment changed, and there was a cultural response to that. So the people that stayed, culturally and maybe even genetically, they are going to have children that are more likely to stay, and their grandchildren are more likely to stay. So it's like everybody that was going to find themselves in a society where they didn't have to be Christian and they could drop religion and live a normal life, they did so. And so they basically it was like a self-selection of a evolution event.
Okay. I think I might have lost you partway through that, but I just want to repeat back a couple things I heard and let me know if I'm getting them wrong. Correct me if I am. One thing I think you just talked about was that, did you say that everybody who maybe had a tendency to not be religious has already left religion?
Not everybody, but it kind of tends that way. Like that's the trend. Like if you have a personality that lends you to not be very religious, while maybe 100 years ago you would have just gone along with it and not said anything or not really thought about it or not really have any outside explanations for the existence of the world and humans and everything. Nowadays you do have atheist explanations. So when people have that option, they kind of remove themselves from the religious community, and then what's left of the religious community is probably genetically predisposed to being religious.
Okay. All right. So what I've heard are three kind of different reasons supporting this belief, and let me see if you agree with these three. I've tried to kind of encapsulate them down. So one of them, the first one you talked about, reason number one, is that more religious people have more children. Cool. Reason two that I'm hearing is that belief in gods is somehow genetic.
Probably.
There's some sort of genetic predisposition. And reason number three is that religious deconversion is slowing down. Does that sound right? You said something about the trends seem that way.
Yeah, especially in the more fundamentalist groups. So the more the like the type of people who are going to send their kids to private Christian schools who are going to homeschool, who separate their children from mainstream, you're going to see far less of them becoming atheists than the mainstream culture.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so I guess something to kind of to help me understand how you're thinking about these things. Of these three reasons, which of them do you think weighs most heavily in your mind that's supporting like that 7 out of 10 confidence level? So just to, yeah, go ahead. The first one. So that more religious people have more children. Okay. So like if we tried to take your 7 out of 10, right? What amount of that 7 do you think is held up mostly by this belief? Like how far does just this reason get you to the idea that atheism be bred out of the population?
Maybe like to a 5.
Okay.
Because that's the crux of it, right?
Okay.
More religious people have more children. And then there's some more complicated things that can complicate that. Like we could see the rise of a secular ideology that is really into having a lot of children. And so that would disrupt the pattern. But I find that kind of hard to imagine, especially because, like, if you would imagine something like that, they would have to be based on something else. And I don't know, if I imagine a secular ideology that's really into having a lot of kids, I kind of think of the Nazis. And that's so taboo. I can't really see that becoming mainstream.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know much about that. I mean, I guess there's like the whole like, you know, eugenics and that sort of like, I don't know, genetic or racial superiority thing, but yeah, I don't really see that becoming mainstream. I hope not. Or at least I hope not, right? Okay. So another question here, because I kind of see kind of a couple of these tying in together. So if I guess first thing would be, I guess we should explore this a little bit longer, but more religious people have more children. What would you have to learn in order to become less confident in that fact?
Just evidence to contradict that.
Just more demographics, like further demographic studies that show something changing.
Yeah.
Okay, that perfectly reasonable. Happy with that. The other thing then is that this idea that belief in gods is genetic. How much of your confidence do you think is tied up in this concept?
I would say like a 4.
Okay.
Like most personality characteristics seem to be about half nature and half nurture.
Okay.
But we don't really have to separate them out because in reality, they're not separated out. You get both from your parents. So if your parents are religious, whether they're passing down their genes or their culture, they're passing it down to you.
Yeah, it does seem that for most people, like the religion they have or lack thereof is a product of their environment. But I think for this claim, like this idea that you know, to breed yourself out, I think there has to be a genetic component to that, unless I'm just misunderstanding it. So, if for example, 20, 30 years in the future, we still see that the more religious people are having more children. If that held true, assuming that's true, which I think it is, you know, you read the book, I believe you. If that held true, But if you came to believe that belief in gods is not genetic in nature, or potentially that the genetic factor is much less important than you currently think, what might that do to your confidence in this claim?
Not that much, unless we have like a huge like government program of cultural genocide where they're taking children away from religious people and rehoming them in secular homes or something.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. Okay, so if that wouldn't really change your confidence, I guess my question would be like, why do you think people who are raised religious leave religion?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
But it's interesting because the more insular the community, the more fundamentalist the community they're raised in, the more likely they are to stay.
Okay.
And so it's making the effect even stronger.
Okay. All right. So I guess my next question though would be, is it possible for people who are raised in really conservative, really restrictive religions to leave too?
Yeah, it's possible, but it's a numbers game. It's not about like what one individual person does. It's about what large numbers of millions of people do.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess then, when you're saying like this idea of atheism we bred out of the gene pool, like, are you envisioning like a future? Maybe just help me kind of picture what you're thinking. Are you picturing like a gene pool, or a future like 100 years from now, or 1,000 years from now, where like virtually everybody is just going to be fundamentalists in these really insular communities then?
Yeah, basically. Not everybody, but it will be much more normal than it is now. And I'd have to look at the numbers. I should have looked that up ahead of time. I don't know what the current projection is. Right now we're looking at a really aging population.
Mm-hmm.
And so those that are young right now, they're going to be adults in the future. And I'm not sure how long it's going to take. And it depends on a lot of factors. And it depends on how these religions and ideologies change over time and how they adapt. And if we might get a new one, we might get a new religion that's even more evolutionarily fit, that's better at getting converts, and that's better at keeping people in the religion, that would overtake the others. It really depends what comes up. It's kind of cultural evolution works very similarly to genetic evolution. And you never know when a new variant is going to pop up and take over. But I do see the way that we currently do things, where we have secular, especially in the United States, our government is so large. I don't imagine the federal government being around in 100 years. I see a lot of smaller communities of different religious pockets, and a lot less of the like very secular cities that we have now. And we might kind of lose cities because we might not need them, because our transportation and communications is going to be so much better that we won't need to live in city centers for work anymore.
Okay. Lots to chew on there. All right. So I might just need to like summarize, make sure I haven't lost things. So you're envisioning a future where like these kind of fundamentalist, very insular communities become like the majority. Um, do you see any like potential challenges that those sorts of more fundamentalist religions might face in becoming really large, and like becoming like a majority situation? Um, like I'm just imagining like if you have large segments of the population that are fundamentalists but don't agree with each other on things,
Mm-hmm.
like that seems like that might be a recipe for some sort of problems arising.
Mm. If we keep democracy, that could be a problem. One of the interesting things is that all of these religions are very similar to each other. So even if they got together and decided to use the government to enforce their rule, a lot of them are the same rules. So like the abortion coalition, like all the different religions can get together on that one. And it doesn't really matter what religion you are; they all say the same thing. Um, but if they basically didn't have the secular world to team up against, yeah, you could have infighting. It really depends on if they adopt the idea of just live and let live, and like I'll have my community, you have your community, and we're not going to mess with each other. If they take a more violent route, that could be a big problem. But I think that evolution is going to favor the more peaceful, because paying for that standing army and paying for all that war is expensive, and that's money that you're not putting into raising the next generation. And so I think over the very long run, we will see people become more peaceful because the violent groups will be killing each other
Okay.
while the peaceful people are just having children.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's like might be a correlation between like more violent extremist groups and fundamentalist groups though.
Mm-hmm.
Like would there be a potential moderating effect as these groups, if these groups got really large?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm also thinking like we see fractures in various religious traditions, right? Schisms and denominations splitting off from each other a lot. Um, I'm just wondering. I'm wondering if there's like a limit, maybe, to like how big a really, because when you talk about like a fundamentalist and like you say an insular community, it seems like an insular community can't be insular once it's really big. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think Abrahamic religions are really good at becoming really big. That's not really a problem for them. Like in an empire, the bigger you get, the harder it is to keep control over your territory. But for Abrahamic religions, the bigger they get, the better off they're going to be. It might be a problem for other people, but for them, it's going to be better. Like look at the Mormon church and how much money they have. And they have
Mhm.
so much control over the stock market, and they can affect things so much. The more people they have under their structure tithing to them, the better off they are.
Mhm.
Um, and even if they do break apart, if they have some sort of disagreement and break in two, they're still going to be so similar to each other. I don't see that it's going to be that big of a problem unless they are being trying to use political power to control each other, which a lot of these groups are libertarian or anarchist, like the very religious Hasidic Jews are pacifist anarchists. The Amish are pacifist anarchists. The Mormons are very libertarian. They're so libertarian they didn't like Trump because they didn't like his Muslim ban and stuff. They're very sensitive about freedom of religion because they were once persecuted. And so I think in the very long run, the bigger a church is, I think the better off they would be. And as long as they're not trying to use the government to enforce their religion on others, and they can still be insular. They could still have insular communities where
Okay.
they don't not interacting with outsiders. Especially their children. Like they keep their children basically in the bubble. And they only go outside the bubble for economic purposes. And they don't really socialize outside of that bubble.
Would that potentially be a challenge for like conversions? I know you're mostly talking about like outbreeding, but for like these insular kind of more fundamentalist, high fertility rate religions, could that be a challenge to overcome, where they like that could slow down their growth as a percentage?
Yeah, so the more you rely on converts, the more you have to interact with people outside your religion, and the kind of like softer the religion gets because they have to appeal to normal people. So you're not going to really get people to join a fundamentalist church from being completely secular unless people change, unless the culture changes and people see, oh, the secular culture is so bad, let me go in the complete opposite direction.
Okay. Okay, so I think you said, as far as your reasons supporting this claim, that this was the most important one, like a 5. This one was a little less important, like a 4. And then number 3 was that religious deconversion is slowing down. How important is this to you as far as supporting that confidence?
Yeah, that's pretty important because if atheism manages to figure out a way to convert people, even the ones raised in very fundamentalist insular communities, then it doesn't really matter how many children they have if they're going to get siphoned off. But I don't see how that could happen if they manage to keep separate. Like as long as they manage to keep separate, you're not going to be able to have influence over them. You're not going to have a chance to deconvert them unless you're doing like a cultural genocide program.
Yeah. And let's hope nothing like that ever happens, right? Okay. So it sounds like you're saying that that is pretty important. So just to kind of test the importance of this reason, if you saw a study, maybe some sort of demographics study, or maybe like a Pew Research study that gets published or something like that, or whatever it would satisfy you, that showed that religious defection is actually accelerating, would that decrease your confidence?
It would matter from who. Accelerating from mainstream, like weak religion, or accelerating from fundamentalist religious sects.
Okay.
But if they are, the number would have to be higher than the fertility advantage. So even if secular people are having 1 child per family and fundamentalists are having 4, you would have to lose 3 to conversion. You would have to have a 75% deconversion rate to cancel it out, which I don't see happening. But if it did, that would cancel it out.
So I'm wondering, like, could we agree? Like you kind of said, there was this like rise of secularization, right? could we agree that the religiosity of like, I don't know if you're seeing this on like a United States scale or you're talking about a world scale or a Western world scale. But if we just looked at the United States, for example, could we agree that over the past, I don't know, X number of years, 10, 20, 30 years, more people have left religion than have, like, that the percentage of the population that is religious has decreased?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it has.
What do you think?
But
What do you think drives that?
I think that people having access to the internet and alternative points of view from the way that they were raised, which is a new thing. Like the being able to have the printing press was a new thing, and we got new ideas and had a lot of political revolutions. We broke up the monopoly of the Catholic Church and got rid of monarchies. And so the invention of the internet and being able to spread atheist ideas to people so easily has allowed a lot of people to hear about it and stop believing. Like, for example, my grandmother, she didn't go to church or anything, but she was like, well, she had literally never heard of evolution. Like, she was never taught it in school. She didn't really know much about it. I mean, she had heard the word, but she didn't know anything about it really. And she was like, well, doesn't God have to exist? And I filled her MP3 player with atheist books, like Dawkins and Hitchens and everything. And I was like, here you go, Grandma. Hear about this. And to this day, she's a rabid atheist.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so she had, her whole life was never exposed to these ideas. And then boom, she was exposed to them and she was an atheist. So I think that like our genes basically, before the internet would have been Christian, after the internet not being Christian.
Okay. Oh, right. I'm gonna have to stop you there because I need an explanation of what you mean by that. What do you mean by Christian genes?
Just, I don't know, whatever it is, our personality, like we have a lot of autism and engineers and computer programmers, and we're just analytical, not very emotional people. And so without the internet, we just go, yeah, Christianity, okay. After the internet, not so much.
So are you saying the genes changed because of the internet, or the internet?
No, it's just our genes were all of a sudden in a different environment. There was the pre-internet environment and the post-internet environment. And so
okay, so the environment changed.
Right.
Okay. And you think that, like, you're saying that a lot of the population was predisposed to losing religion or leaving religion, and they just needed like a exposure to these ideas or something like that?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that kind of comes back to that other reason, right? This idea that religious belief is genetic.
I think it's kind of like a personality set.
Okay, like a personality thing. So a combination, maybe belief in gods is dependent on personality.
We're gonna have to read the comment section here soon.
Genes and
it's blowing up.
we'll get to it a little bit. I mostly want to focus on you. We can come back to them like kind of when we've kind of wrapped things up a little bit.
I haven't like been able to stop and read it, but it's like bing, bing, bing.
Yeah, I see the little number going up. Belief in gods is dependent on personality, environment. Okay. Let's kind of modify that then. And so like personality depends on genes and the environment. Belief in gods is dependent on personality. Okay. And then, of course, yeah, somebody's environment has a lot to do with like who they're raised by and that sort of thing. All right. So you talked a little bit about like access to information and that sort of thing. Um, and you've also talked about these insular communities. More religious people tend to be more insular. Um, they have lots of children. They're passing on their personalities, maybe in some sort of form, combination of genes and environment and how they raise their kids and that sort of thing. And that, therefore they have fewer kids, right? Fewer people in the next generation leave in these sorts of communities. So you talked a little bit about, this access to information is one of the driving factors that has like been like the rise of secularization. Like, have you heard of like the rise of the nuns?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Non-affiliated, yeah.
been like non-affiliated, non-religious, atheist,
Mhm.
agnostic / other, right?
A lot of people are religious, but they don't go to church.
Right.
And I kind of blame the Christian churches for that. They're not doing a very good job. And we could see that change. We could see them get better and more useful and less preachers in sneakers and more first century Christian, in which case
Okay.
I think Christianity would become way more popular than it is now. But right now, a lot of people don't, including me, don't see the point in going to church because what are you going to get out of it? You hear the same sermon every Sunday. You go there for an hour, you go home. Most churches don't have schools associated with them. They don't have a lot of things. The Mormons, I like that they do have a welfare program. They have food banks, and if you they basically won't let you go homeless. They will pay your mortgage or your rent, your utility bills if you're completely broke and can't pay it yourself. But so many churches, they don't have anything like that. And there's no practical purpose to them existing. And people say, oh, it's about the belief. It's about the belief. But a lot of our decisions are based upon practical needs. And if the church is not meeting any practical needs, people aren't going to bother going. But I think that they could greatly improve. I don't see them getting worse. I see them getting better.
Do you think more fundamentalist religions where people are having more kids, do you think they are better at providing
Yeah.
meeting those needs?
hmm
Okay.
The Jews are really good at meeting those needs. They have like a whole like emergency call system in their neighborhoods where you can like call up a number and they will come help you in an emergency. It could be something from I locked my keys in the car to someone needs CPR. And they really make a point of not relying on the government for things. And I think that's amazing.
Okay. All right. So I think I was going somewhere and then it's fine. I'm going to come back to it. So this might
Okay.
seem like it's a non sequitur. So I'm actually backing up a little bit, but that is interesting. So it sounds like, and let me know if you agree, and let me also stop me if you disagree. It sounds like one way may be that it might not be true that your overall claim, right? This idea that atheism would be bred out of the gene pool. I guess I've kind of identified one path because you kind of said that in order for these kind of more fundamentalist, high fertility rate religions to continue to grow, is they have to hold on to their members, they have to stay insular. But one of the ways you identified that people can be, I don't want to say caused, but influenced maybe to leave a religion is through like access to the internet and access to new ideas. And you brought up your grandma as an example, right? So I guess the big thing is, do you see difficulties in these insular communities maintaining that barrier or preventing members from accessing information and new ideas?
yes, but I think they will get better at it over time.
So they
Because
become like more high controlling of their members.
yeah,
Okay.
especially regarding the internet, I think being on the internet is going to become a major taboo, especially as it becomes more and more destructive, and as AI is coming on board.
Mhm.
And so basically a lot of the internet is designed to serve you the content that's going to get you addicted to that platform and continue watching. So our current iteration is like TikTok. Now YouTube has those shorts and Facebook has the reels and these really short videos that keep you scrolling, and they have an addictive nature, and that's
Mhm.
really destructive to the person's life, and really destructive to mental health. And obviously if people are committing suicide, they're not evolutionarily fit, they're removing themselves from the gene pool permanently. And so we see a huge rise in suicide, especially in teen girls, and that's what they're doing. They're on TikTok.
Mhm.
um and I think we're going to see people get more strict about keeping their children off the internet completely. um And so, like, those right now, they're considered like freaks. These freaks who don't let their kids on the internet, and they're so controlling. And oh my gosh, can you believe this? And it's considered almost abusive now. In the future, I think that's going to be like, well, obviously, I'm not stupid. I'm not going to let my kid smoke crack, you know?
Yeah. I hope people don't think that that's weird or freaky. I mean, I don't know. Like, you gotta allow your kids some freedom, but well, I mean, I guess that's my opinion. But you gotta
a
have
lot of
limits, right?
a lot of people think it's like, what? I'm not going to control what my child sees on the internet. They're very like hands off about it.
That seems negligent.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I shouldn't bring my opinions into this. Okay.
We're like, yeah, all you people watching, if you let your kids on the internet, what are you doing? Stop it.
No, it's okay to let them on the internet, but like, there's some supervision, some limits, like.
People in the chat, I want to see how many kids you have. I want to see the number. Say 0 if you don't have any. I want to see in the chat how many of you have kids. I'll do it too. Okay, I forgot the point that I was going to make. We were talking about the internet. Yeah. So
Access to information.
and
Right.
AI coming on, and deep fakes and VR, and people are just gonna get sucked into this matrix of the AI serving you whatever you most want to see, and this constant dopamine trip. And people are just gonna basically disappear into the internet. And then there's gonna be the rest of us who are gonna be like, remember the 90s? That was so great. And we're just going to be walking around in real life. Like, where'd everybody go? Like, the streets are so empty.
Yeah, I don't know if I see that happening. I mean, I think I don't know. Whatever. I'm not I'm not going to sit here and speculate. Okay, so you talked a little bit about like controlling like what kids see, but do you see an issue with like adults, like especially like people, they leave home, maybe they go to school, or maybe they don't in these really insular religious communities, right? But um, like when somebody's running their own life, like even if they're part of these like high control religions, like is that like an opportunity for them to possibly deconvert once they reach adulthood or independence?
Yeah. I mean, there's always that opportunity, but the older someone is, they tend to stick with what they know. So once you get past a certain age, if you get to 25, your ideas are usually pretty set, and you've probably been taught by your community why the outside world is so bad and why you shouldn't go explore it. Or maybe they told you to explore it, see how bad it is for yourself, and then come back like the Amish do with Rumspringa. And they go, that's terrible. I don't want to do that. And like a lot of people, get kicked out of these cults, or they choose to leave, and they talk about how lonely mainstream society is, and they feel so isolated, and they're begging to go back. There's a reason why people give up so much control to cults, because that feeling of belonging is so strong in people. And maybe one of the things that will most be selected for is how group centered or individualistic somebody is. So if you're the type of person that doesn't need a strong community, then you'll leave the community, and those who stay are going to be the ones who are really concerned about other people and having connections with other people. And so the people that stay are going to be even more so like people pleasers.
Yeah. You use the word cult there. By like, when you're thinking of these like high fertility religions, are you associating that with like cults in like the
Well,
traditional sense, or
it's
like the
basically on a
colloquial sense?
spectrum.
Okay.
Like a cult is just a new religion, right?
It depends on the definition. So it depends on how you're defining it. If you just mean new religion, then I don't think the Amish are necessarily that new, but I don't know if you're calling them a
Right.
cult.
I think a lot of people would call the Amish a cult. I know. I guess it just depends on if the religion is destructive to your life, then it's definitely a cult. But that religion probably also is going to die off. So you get these new religions that are brand new. They haven't been time tested. They screw up people's lives, and it falls apart, or they all die for whatever reason. We just had the anniversary of Waco. And the religions that are time tested, there must be something about them. They must be doing more for the members, for the believer, than they're taking away. They must be like doing something for them to make their lives better in some way. Basically, if it makes them more evolutionarily fit, then the religion will continue. If the religion does not make them more evolutionarily fit, the religion will collapse unless they have a really, really high conversion rate like secularism does right now. Right now, secularism has a really, really high conversion rate, and they rely on converts because they're not making their own children. But I think that's
Hey,
going to
I got
run
as many as you do. All right. That's just a joke.
You're the exception. I was like, oh wow, I'm surprised he has kids.
Oh yeah, of course. I've always wanted kids. I'm a huge yeah. I kind of feel like I've accomplished all my goals in life. Not all of them, but like the big ones.
Are you going to keep going? Are you going to have more?
We're planning on one more. Yep.
It's funny whenever someone asks me how many kids I'm going to have, and I say I'm going to have as many as the good Lord gives me, and everyone goes, "Oh my!" They freak out. They freak out, and I kind of enjoy it. I'm kind of a troll at heart.
Hey, I'm not going to tell other people how to live their lives. That's for sure. Okay, so kind of come back to this is something I thought about earlier, actually. So if religion, you said recently, if a religion is destructive to your life, it's probably going to die off. And you're kind of speaking about cults as well. So let me see if this kind of, if you agree with this. One of the ways that like when people are talking about cults, they often refer to like really high control groups, like where there's high behavior control, high thought control, high emotional control, and information control. That information control especially kind of goes along. Oh, my fingers. The information control kind of goes along with what you're talking about, like with being really insular, right? And like restricting access to information. So is it possible that maybe some of these high control religions, is it possible that in order to like maintain that insularness, that they could become more cult-like and potentially become more destructive to their members?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because like you just talked about like Waco, that sort of thing, right? Like, or like the fundamentalist LDS, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that. If you've
Yeah.
seen,
Hmm.
there's a heartbreaking Netflix documentary. My wife found, we watched together. It was, what was it called? Like, um, uh, something pray and stay sweet or something like that. It was all about like
Keep
the
sweet.
FLDS. Yeah, keep sweet,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
I think I've seen
Um,
that one.
yeah. Because you kind of talked about like, government genocide or whatever. Which I wouldn't call it that, but like those are examples where you had these cults that were basically just abusing the people in the religion, right?
Hmm.
And eventually the government came in and be like, listen, you can't be raping kids. Like,
Hmm.
we're gonna put a stop to you, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I'm just wondering if that might be something that's kind of like a check on like the ability of these kind of insular high control religions to grow too insular or too large. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm wondering because like I haven't seen this rise of these like really religious groups yet, like in the population.
Hmm.
Um, and if this doesn't track, stop me at any point. I don't even know. I might be doing a terrible job of SE right now, but like, for example, like the demographics of the U.S. Have kind of been following a similar trend to what happened in Europe like decades earlier. Um,
Hmm.
like, is there, maybe I don't know, you read this book about these religious demographics. Is there like an uptick in like Europe that's happened with religious people, or with maybe more like fundamentalist religious people, like that might be in like the United States future? Or
So there are groups in Europe that are um very religious, that are like fundamentalist religion groups that are growing compared to the mainstream population. But also they are dealing with the Muslim immigration, and the
Hmm.
Muslims are having a much higher birth rate than the natives.
So part of that
And
could be
so,
driven by immigration, you're saying?
yeah, so we might
Okay.
see a Muslim Europe in the future.
Like majority, you mean?
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that would definitely be interesting. Um. Okay. So, I guess I'm just gonna kind of like go back over some of these reasons again and just see where you're at with them. And if you might want to kind of re-rank them at all after having this discussion. Um, so earlier, I think you started off saying that reason number one, that more religious people have more children, that this was kind of like the most important reason. Um,
Mhm.
and then reason number two, you said was a little bit less important than that.
Mhm.
Um, then reason number three, I don't know if I ever got a number on it, but you said it was really important. So of those three reasons, right? Reason one, more religious people have more children. Reason two, belief in gods is dependent on personality, which comes from the genes and environment. Then reason three, religious deconversion is slowing down. Um, if
So
one of if you one second, real quick, if one of these reasons you stopped believing that it was true or that it wasn't a good reason, which one of those three, if you changed your mind on it, do you think would drop your confidence the most?
I would say that 1 and 3 both have to be true. We can probably drop reason 2, but 1 and 3 both have to be true in order
Okay.
for the conclusion to work.
All right. So reason two, you're saying this one is really not that
Yeah.
doesn't really contribute to your confidence that highly.
Yeah.
Okay. So here, let me go back. So one and three, right? Just to be clear, reason one, more
Mhm.
religious people have more children. And reason number three, religious deconversion is slowing down. Um, okay. So in that case, um, if you if you came across information, or maybe let me put it this way, what could you learn that would make you less confident the religious deconversion is slowing down? What sort of evidence, or what have you, would make you less confident that that's true?
If we saw these really fundamentalist groups like whatever it is the Duggars are, and the Amish, and the Hasidic Jews, and the fundamentalist Mormons, if we saw them losing a lot of their children to atheism and to the mainstream culture, then that would make me question. But even then, even if it's happening for a short period, that doesn't mean they're going to they won't figure out a way to counteract that, because you know, the ideologies aren't going to stay the same. They're going to continue to get better. They're going to adapt to what their competing ideologies are doing. And so they're going to get better at inoculating their children to other ideologies. I think Christianity was not ready for any atheist arguments. They were not ready at all. And so they got hit with like a ton of bricks, and they still haven't figured out answers to most of these questions, which is kind of what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to take Christianity and turn it into something that's logically coherent, that someone could come to me with all of the questions that I had 15 years ago about why do bad things happen, and all of why did, all of the questions that atheists ask. And if someone had given me good answers, I probably never would have become an atheist. And so, like, I want to contribute to making Christianity more evolutionarily fit.
Interesting. So when you say you want to help improve it, like, does that necessarily, is like becoming more high control and insular part of that?
I guess it would be preferable if you could participate in the marketplace of ideas and just have really good arguments and have those answers. Then you wouldn't have to go the route of just don't look at it, which is basically what the left is doing now. They're basically saying do not look at any right-wing sources. And that's working really well for them. But they lose a lot of people because sometimes they get curious and they go look and they see some ideas that they've never heard before and they don't have arguments against. And they go and totally change the other side. But it's still very effective to just tell people, just don't look at it.
Yeah, you don't seem like you're the type of person who would want to be really insular. I feel like you wouldn't be here.
My children are not on the internet, but
yeah, how old are they?
I'm 4 and 7.
Yeah, the most that my kids are on the, like, they play, like, kit games on the tablet that we downloaded, and the one does watch some YouTube, but it's YouTube Kids, and I locked it down. He can only be on there for like an hour or something like that. Like, he watches Lego videos, a bunch of videos about Legos.
Like, nope. YouTube Kids is still too dangerous. I have to like pre-screen the TV shows and like watch them ahead of time, because I'm like, oh, like, it would be it's crazy what slipped in there. And I mean, I kind of just want to get rid of it altogether. I just go Amish, honestly, because hearing the whining over the iPad is like worse than just like We could just not have one. We just throw it in the garbage. I could take a hammer to it right now. We don't have to deal with this anymore. I don't have to hear any more whining. But
all right. All right. So I'm going to try to rephrase your claim and see if you like this better. Because I think you've kind of dropped this idea of, or at least you've said it's not that important, this idea that belief, right, or religiosity, it has to be based on, personality and genes and your upbringing necessarily. But that really what this is all about is having a bunch of kids and stopping them from leaving through maybe high control tactics or information control, behavior control, right? Some of those kind of classic kind of like the bite model. Have you heard of the bite model for cults? Like some of those like kind of bite model cult kind of religiosity. So I feel like maybe the idea of this being genetic and being something that could be bred out, is that something that you think maybe it's not so much about the genes, but maybe atheism will be overwhelmed in the meme pool?
yeah, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. Cultural evolution and gene evolution work hand in hand.
Right.
And reinforce each other.
Yeah.
Like a culture that really likes blue eyes, is a blue eye gene pops up, works together to create a blue-eyed population.
Right. Yeah. That's that's an example of like a reinforcing like sexual selection sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are also things with like extended phenotype and that sort of. There's a whole lot of things. I'm a biology guy, so there's a whole lot we could talk about with that stuff. Okay, so we kind of knocked down. I want to say knocked down. I don't want to say that. That sounds adversarial and negative. I don't want to say that. We kind of pared down the reasons to these two main ones, right? And then maybe we've kind of revised this claim that atheism will be overwhelmed in like this meme pool, or that essentially like highly religious cultures will eventually outbreed and come to dominate like the less highly religious, the moderate religious people. So not even necessarily atheism, right? You're even just referring to like, people who are like, oh yeah, I believe in God, but I'm not that religious, or some sort of moderate version of these religions. If you were to kind of reflect back on the conversation that we've had, do you still feel like you'd be at a 7 out of 10 for this claim? I mean, obviously, this claim is slightly different than the earlier one, but I think this is more of what you're saying, possibly. Where do you think you are in your confidence now?
Same.
Similar, still around 7 out of 10. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think I have any other questions about this topic right now for you. Do you have any other thoughts or questions for me before we start looking at some of the comments?
Yeah, let's get into these comments.
All right. Let me know if there's any that you want me to throw up on the screen. I'm going to kind of scroll back a little ways, or maybe I should look at some of the more recent ones first. Let's see.
There's a whole conversation.
Yeah, Antoine and Chase are having a conversation here. I'm talking about evil. I don't think this is necessary. We got Spinoza's God, Leibniz. None of this is. All this, I'm sure it's interesting. I'm sure it's a great conversation, but I don't think it has a whole lot to do with what we were talking about. Satan. Okay, this was the name of that Netflix documentary. If any of you guys are interested, Keep Sweet and Pray. It's a real deep dive look into the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints and what happened there. So if you want to be upset, you can go watch that. I remember being kind of heartbroken watching that. It's kind of mortifying. Sasha providing some evidence in support of one of your reasons here. Sasha says that his parents had 11 kids and he's the only atheist.
Yep.
Whereas my parents had 3 kids, and I don't know if any of us would consider ourselves religious. So, but his parents had 11 kids, which means they might be even one of those more fundamentalist sects, right? As opposed to mine.
Everybody else has 0 kids.
We're the only ones with kids here.
No internet is kind of abused seriously. LOL. I read too much sci-fi.
I think that was about the everybody plugged into the internet and the rest of us be walking around like it's the 90s.
I've never heard of sci-fi. I don't read a lot of sci-fi. I did read a lot of Heinlein though back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole idea, like people being plugged into the internet, it's kind of matrixy. There was also that there's a movie based on a book called Ready Player One came out recently. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I think that's kind of along those. I didn't see it or read it. I heard it wasn't very good. We kind of covered that question. Chase asked about genes changing, so we got through that. I'm I must have broken at some point. Oh, I think this is an interesting question from Sasha. It was like 45 minutes ago. So Sasha asks, could future laws like separation of church and state increase the death of religious culture acceptance?
I think the opposite. I think the more religious tolerance we have, the more religion is going to flourish. I think the only way I see religion not flourishing is if the government asserts control when it's still majority secular and moderately religious people, and using the force of the state to force the fundamentalists to assimilate.
Yeah. Or I think I don't know. I don't even know if that would do that. Because I feel like I see what kind of what happened in Europe. Europe is secularized earlier or faster, and a lot of European countries have or had state religions. Some still do, and that seemed to actually work against that interest.
Because we have a free market in churches, so we can pick and choose what church we want, which helps the churches culturally evolve to be more robust. While in Europe, it's monopolies, so monopolies never work very well.
Yeah, like if you're in England and the options were, for a long time, well, you can be in the Church of England or you can just not. And that was it. Like, if that's your only option and you're like, I don't agree with this, you can't go find something slightly different. You can be like, oh yeah, but I do like what's going on over here with the Methodists. Like, no, the Methodists had to leave the country. Like, Chase was quoting something earlier. Pew Research Center. Okay. Yeah, this is something that I had seen before from Pew Research, and I wondered if you had thoughts on this. So there's actually, I might actually post the link if you want to see it. I don't know if you've seen it before, but so for example, Christianity in America dropped to 65%, down from 77% in 2009. The number of atheists doubled from 2 to 4% the past 10 years. 27% are not affiliated with any religion. And then he's got some more stats in there in the chat.
I think we covered that. That's just kind of the environment changing and adapt, and our culture is having to adapt to having the internet. And people who are going to leave religion are going to leave, and those who are going to stay are going to stay. and have more children. And in the long run, as long as religious people keep having more children, and as long as they maintain more of those children, then the secular world is having children, then religion will continue to grow. And not just like moderate Protestants. I mean like hardcore. And he said like 70% will leave faith in college. The universities have been very effective in siphoning off religious people and turning people into Democrats. And this is basically creating an environment where conservative Christians are no longer sending their kids to these universities, and they're setting up their own. And they're just leaving because they realize that it's propaganda and their children aren't strong enough to withstand it. And the enrollment in the universities is dropping precipitously.
Like the enrollment of like conservative Christians, you mean? Or because I think enrollment is increasing, hasn't it? At least my university's enrollment goes up every year, but
oh, maybe so. Like my college, not my college, but a college that's sort of local to me had a scandal with a woke mob getting violent and the school capitulating, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and now they can't get students to come. So once a university gets a reputation for being woke, people stop going.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that. My university, I don't think anybody's calling it that. Well, some people I'm sure are, because some people think anything that's, even like right of center is woke. But okay. So this is I posted a link in the chat. So it was a Pew report that came out in 2022 called "Modeling the Future of Religion in America." And then I don't know if I can share I'd rather not share my whole screen, but that's fine, I guess. Oh, I can do a window. Okay. Good. Yes, this one. Allow. Let's see if I'm doing this right. So part of that is this graph here shows like 4 different projections based on religious switching. So based on this whole idea of people who are switching, and it's talking about both like in and out of religion. And so this is like percentage of people who are Christian. Can you see that very well or not?
Okay. Yeah, I can.
Okay. And so there were like 4 different models. One of them is talking about like if no person changes with their religion after 2020, that we would still have a drop in like the total share of the population that are Christian from 64% to 54% by 2070. I think that mostly has to do with just like the differences, once again, demographically between like age groups, right? Like generational cohorts. The pink one is steady switching, where it's like stays the same rate. And then a couple of them are like rising switching rates, because, and I think they're saying that because it seemed like it was almost accelerating in the past. So one of the things, and this is not something you usually do in street epistemology, and I know that, but sometimes like after the conversation, if somebody identified something that they think could reduce their confidence, like then it can be appropriate to share data with them, I think. And so we kind of put a wrap on like the interview. But I think one of the things you did say was like, if I saw accelerating deconversions, that might decrease my confidence. I think this Pew study does indicate that at least recently, that there's actually been like an acceleration of people who have been leaving religions.
So if you put on this graph fundamentalists, people who are going to church more than once a week, people who identify with one of these high control groups, they're going to go the opposite way. They're going to be going up. So they're going to take over the Christian population and keep going.
Okay. So basically you'd see that this would like kind of bottom out somewhere where let me make sure I can understand you. Like maybe this gets to 20% in the year 2130 or something like that. But then it's you're basically like it's nothing but the most fundamentalist, most insular communities that are left. Okay, and then you'd see like potentially over even the longer term, right? So this is something that maybe none of us would be alive to see, right? Okay, interesting. All right. Okay. U.S. nuns will approach majority by 2070 if reason switching trends continue. All right. Huh. Yeah, I think it's something interesting to look at. Like, what are the reproductive rates of, the non-religious, but also not just the non-religious, but also just the nuns, right? The non-affiliated, and also like more moderate or liberal religious people too. Because I think your reason number one, right? This one, I don't think this is controversial. Like, I think this is just pretty much true, at least generally. I'm not so sure this is true though. So that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Right. If you look at you, so you have to separate the moderately religious, like the mainstream Protestant and Catholics, and the fundamentalists.
Right.
Because the special sauce is really in the fundamentalists.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, I think I see where we kind of agree, and I think I also see where we kind of might disagree. So yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from, which is my main goal. Right. So in general, especially the more fundamentalist, higher religiosity groups, they have more kids. They have a higher retention rate, and that eventually that will outstrip the reproduction rate or whatever of everybody else, or at least
Sasha.
Sasha has something else to say here.
Sasha had an interesting question.
The COVID one.
Yeah.
The COVID. Okay, here I'll put that up there. I'll also go back to this. Okay. During COVID, churches resisted COVID restrictions. Could future deadly viruses reduce religious people?
That's a good question. I like that. So if we actually had a virus that was actually deadly, we could see a lot of more, like the more religious you are, the more likely you would be to continue going to church and being involved in your community, and the more likely you would be to get sick. But also, you would be getting, some people would die, but then the rest would get immunity and continue their lives and to nurse the sick. And so in early days of Christianity, they were known for going into plagues and not being scared about their own lives because they were confident that they had eternal life in Jesus, and they were nurses to people who were sick, which made people love them and join. And so if there was a really, really bad pandemic, I could see it hitting the Christian community the hardest at first, but then they come back with immunity and are out there helping people who are affected. And on the flip side, if we have COVID 2.0, I think that Christians would be more resistant to locking down and to getting vaccines, which might help them. So it could either way. I think it would be better for Christians in the long run, unless it was like so deadly that like so many people died that it really hurt the population, especially if it affected young people.
Yeah.
It has to be a really deadly virus.
Something more Spanish flu like, where it's, disproportionately affecting the young rather than the old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Hopefully they don't make another virus.
I don't want to go through another pandemic. So don't mess with bats. All right. Okay. Let's see. Chase data is an average of population. Why should we think these trends will not continue? I think, okay. I think you might have already kind of addressed some of these already. But yeah, if you want to maybe put a wrap on, give your thoughts on this one, and then I think we're probably good to wrap it up unless you have any other thoughts or any questions for me.
Okay. Basically, Christianity has to adapt to the internet and atheists, and those people who were going to deconvert probably already deconverted, and their children are going to be more likely to stay in the religion. So I don't think it's going to be a perpetual thing where whatever percentage it is converts to being atheist every year. I think it's going to slow down because basically Christianity is going to become inoculated against atheism. We're going to figure out how to answer these questions. Or maybe we will all become Muslim one day, or maybe we'll all become Amish or Mormon or a new religion that will be invented that we don't know about. But as long as atheists aren't having children, in the long run, they can't be the future because they're not evolutionarily fit.
All right, you heard it here. Do your part. Go have your babies. No, I'm totally
kidding.
Have live your life. You live your life. You do you. Do
or don't have children. Maybe we don't want you in the gene pool. I don't know.
I don't even know who you are out there. Right? But if you're watching my channel, you're probably pretty cool. So all right. Well, Richelle.
And there could be all kinds of interesting implications for what a future society of all fundamentalist religious people is going to be. It might be a society that looks very different, and our genetically predisposed personalities will be quite different than they are today.
Okay. Well, awesome. Anything else you want to share, or do you have any questions for me at this point, Richelle?
Do you want me to ask you about why you do SE?
You certainly can. You can ask me whatever you want. I'm an open book.
Okay. We've already been going for an hour and a half, but
that's all right. I've been drinking some coffee, so I'm going to be awake for a while anyway. Because I knew that if I didn't have some coffee, my brain was going to stop working halfway through this conversation. So it's fine. A refill right now.
Okay. Why do you do street epistemology?
I think it's a few reasons. The big one was just that I saw it as a way to have conversations with people about important things, things that things people will often, because they're important, they'll get heated about it, and people will get upset and they'll get offended, and like the entire conversation breaks down and just becomes an argument and like a shouting match. And I saw it as a way to like have those conversations with people in a non-confrontational kind of collaborative way. And I think we really need that really bad. Like the last, oh gosh. I mean, you could say the last 4 years, you could say the last 7 years, you could say the last 10, 15 years. I don't know. It seems like as my life's gone on, like the ability of people to have like civil discussions with each other has deteriorated. And that, I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that's kind of what I saw. And so that's the big thing is, I think just as a process, it's a great process for listening to somebody, making sure they feel heard, making sure you're understanding what they're saying, and then like the ability to kind of like walk somebody through like a critical thinking process to possibly get them to reflect on their beliefs. To me, like that's kind of like the icing. Like that is, I guess, part of the goal, or maybe it's the main goal, is just getting people to reflect. But I think for me, like even if through the course of an interview, my interview partner never seriously reflects, well, I would be disappointed, but I think I would still have accomplished some of the main goals that I have, the things that drew me to doing this, which was, that non-confrontational, peaceable, civil discussion where people feel heard and I get an opportunity to understand somebody else and their perspective. If somebody winds up changing their mind, cool. If they don't, that's also okay. Sometimes people I interview, they do move on their confidence on things. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. I do like that because I think that shows a willingness to change one's mind and an openness. So I always like applaud that and feel kind of good about that, just because like I think it's important to be open to new information and be willing to take information on board and not being dogmatic in the things we believe. But like I said, I think that a lot of that stuff, to me at least, is icing. Like just being able to talk about these things and not have people like blow up at each other and like hurt feelings and like damaging relationships. I think that's the big thing. And it's just a really good practice for me. It's a really good practice for me to be able to do that, so that, if I find myself in kind of a difficult conversation, I've got some tools, some skills that I can fall back on.
Why do you think it's important to have conversations with people that you disagree with?
Two main reasons, I guess. One, there are always going to be people you disagree with on all kinds of different topics, and some of them might be family, loved ones, friends, right? And so being able to have those conversations, I think, is just good, because you're gonna have them sometimes, right? Like we've all been at like Thanksgiving or whatever, and somebody said something and you're like, and you don't know whether you should say anything, and and sometimes somebody says something and then things get kind of heated or whatever, right? So I think those conversations are gonna happen. So that's part of it. They're just gonna happen. So being able to have them in a more productive way, I think, is big. And the other one is just like that's a learning opportunity, right? Somebody who has a stance or belief that I don't have, it doesn't mean that they're wrong and I'm right. Like being able to have those conversations might mean that, I'll learn something that I might change my stance on something. Like, and I always want to be open to learning more. Like I love learning, and having these talks with other people is one way that I could possibly do that.
Mm-hmm. Have I changed your mind on anything in our two conversations?
I don't. Maybe a little bit. I think this conversation, when you first presented it, I was like, well, that's silly. But I think once we kind of uncovered it, I was like, okay, I kind of understand where she's coming from. And maybe it just wasn't the right words or the phrase correctly originally. I think there definitely is something to this idea of, and I think we actually do see it in some of the demographics. I've seen it before where when you look at these studies, the religions that are losing people are generally not like the more extreme fundamentalist ones. So I think that you're right, at least to a certain extent. I think part of that might be that, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to really speculate too much, but I think there is something to what you're saying. I just don't know that the trends would ever reverse so much, or that kind of growth for these kind of like more extreme religions is sustainable in like the modern world. So like I could see there always being like this like kind of background baseline. There will always be people with religious beliefs, and there will always be theists, and there will always be people who believe in some sort of deity of some sort, I think. But I think I could see there being like a, it finds some sort of water finding its level kind of thing around like 20 to 25%. Because I think some of those like really like more high control groups, I think for a lot of people being in those is destructive to them. And so I don't see them growing so much that they like totally outbreed or whatever, or outcompete people with like a more ecumenical worldview, maybe a little more pluralistic worldview. I think people value like the ability for people to believe different things, and it's okay. Like I think pluralism is something that even people who don't know what that word means, they do value it, at least like in the United States and like the Western world. So, but I think so that would be something where I'd say that like it's something I hadn't considered that much, but I think I'm on board with you at least to a certain extent with this one. Previous one was mostly about teachings of Jesus. I wouldn't agree with you that they're perfect, but I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. But I already believed that, so I don't think it really changed on that.
Okay.
Like I already thought a lot of the teachings of Jesus are pretty good. So, but I wouldn't go so far as to say perfect. But that's also not a word I really use. So.
Sasha asked, how did you come across street epistemology? Was it a process you searched for?
I guess we can both answer this. I honestly can't remember how I found it. I somehow got, I don't know even who I found for, I don't know if it was Anthony or if it was Reed or if it was Ty from Let's Chat. So Reed, Cordial Curiosity, Tyrone Wells from Let's Chat, and which he doesn't really do SE videos anymore. He has a podcast, which is a radio show. And then Anthony Magnabosco, who's kind of like the first one to like go out and do this and like put it online. So I found one of them somehow, I don't know, YouTube algorithm, I guess. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is cool. That's how I kind of fell into it. Richelle?
I don't remember. I really don't remember. I think I discovered it multiple times and then forgot about it. And then it popped back up. I was like, oh yeah. How was I think it was Anthony talking to the Mormons, the Mormon missionaries. I'm like, oh yeah, how those missionaries doing? How they hanging in there? My husband was raised Mormon.
Oh really?
So I know about the missionaries.
Yeah.
They really want us to come back.
Where I guess you don't have to answer this because it's about him. Where is he at with like religion and faith stance stuff now?
How much time do you have? I mean, I guess the same as me. We actually met at an atheist event. And going along this religious journey, reading the Bible, and we talk about things together and read things together a lot. and I'll read a book and then tell him all about it. And it's the thing that the Mormons get really wrong is they do this really weird thing where in order to get a temple recommend, which is what you have to do in order to go to the temple and do special ceremonies like get married and get baptized and stuff, you have to have an interview with the bishop who is like the pastor, and he'll ask you questions to make sure you're following the rules. And so what this ends up being is a teenager in this office being asked by this grown man about their masturbation habits.
It's uncomfortable.
And if they're honest, they aren't allowed to go to the temple with all their friends. And so they basically have to lie and say, "Oh no, Bishop, I'm not masturbating."
So does the Mormon Church select for dishonest people?
Maybe. And apparently this is extra traumatic for the girls who are being asked these questions by a grown man alone in his office.
It's still a man.
Yeah,
They
there's
don't
not
have
a
somebody else come
separate
in and
woman doing it for the girls.
Yeah, that's super uncomfortable.
I think they're gonna change it. There's a lot of people like Mormons like still in the church who are like, you got to stop doing this. Like, this is not right.
Interesting. Okay. And so are you saying that was part of the reason he left Mormonism? I didn't catch that. Okay.
Like we checked it out. We try to like, even though we don't believe in Joseph Smith, we like, there's a nice community. Let's go check it out, you know? And he's just like, I go into the building, I'm getting a panic attack. We have to leave. Like, I can't do it. It's just too much guilt and like this obsession with masturbation as a teenager that I have to get out of here. And I'm like, okay, cross this one off the list.
Yeah, I can identify with that. I mean, not to that kind of like extent, I guess, with the one-on-one interview, but I definitely understand that whole psychological process because I was a teenager too. So
I grew up Lutheran, and it's like your pastor never had you go into his office and he asked you about your masturbation habits, and I'm like, nope, that never happened in my church.
No, that was just between me and Jesus. That was sorry, I promise I won't do it again. No, I did it again. All right, that's too much information, probably. anybody raised in like anybody raised in like a conservative Christian upbringing, I think probably identifies with that at least somewhat. So. All right. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, Richelle, it was nice having you on again. Thanks for having another chat with me. And as a reminder, anybody who's watching, if you want to have an SE talk, there are links down in the doobly-doo. It's also in the live chat. I think it should still be pinned over there. Also, check out Richelle's links. Her link tree is posted down below, so you can check out her endeavors via that. You can find her at Moral Government. There's a 0 in there somewhere on Twitter, or search Moral Government on Facebook, right? And some other places. But if you click on the link tree, you'll find her.
I have a Substack. I'm working on an article about the morality of Hogwarts Legacy. And it's not about the trans thing.
Oh.
It's about like different. The killing curse.
Oh, yeah. The killing curse. One of the worst things to exist in that. Not for any moral reason, just like from a storytelling reason. If they just didn't have it, it would have been better, I think. It would make the world a more interesting place. I don't know, but maybe it's an allegory for guns. Anyway, okay.
Exactly.
Well, that's what the article's about. Right?
And the ATF.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Richelle. Thanks for coming on again. Appreciate it. Any last words before we sign off here?
No, I mean, I want to see comments about from atheists about what do you think should be done about this issue? Do you think atheism should become more evolutionarily fit. How to make atheism more evolutionarily fit without becoming a Nazi.
Right. Engage in the meme war, but not an actual war, right?
A fun thought experiment.
All right. So
even though
if you
I'm
have
playing for the other team now, I'm not an atheist anymore, but I'm still rooting for you guys.
Oh, thanks. All right. So if you have a thought on that, go ahead and drop that in the comments below. Thanks for watching, whether you were one of the people here live or somebody catching it later on. If you found this conversation valuable and you enjoyed it, go ahead, give me one of those like, subscribes, ring the bells, all that good stuff. I will be having hopefully more of these, and as well as some more live in real life conversations when the weather gets nicer here, because right now it's gross. All right. Well, once again, thanks, Richelle. Thanks for everybody else who was watching. That'll be it for tonight. Good night.
Bye.